Well, welcome everyone to NAMI at noon. I'm Amy Brundle. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager here at NAMI North Carolina, and we are so pleased to have everyone here for this month's webinar. First of all, as always, we'd like to thank the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services for their support of today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items. Today's webinar especially is going to be a Q&A. So if you have any questions for our speaker today, just feel free to simply put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will be providing ample time to get to those towards the end of the presentation today. Also, we will be sending out the recording and any additional material that our speaker provides later on in the week, so keep an eye out for that. And now we'd like to welcome today's speaker, Nicole Wallace. Nicole is a licensed clinical mental health counselor and the owner of Transformation Counseling and Consulting here in Raleigh, with over 20 years of experience helping clients overcome trauma, manage life transitions, and develop coping skills. She specializes in helping women heal from anxiety, depression, trauma, and life's transitions. She has a certification in perinatal mental health and is a postpartum support international peer mentor. Nicole provides a caring, non-judgmental therapeutic environment within her practice to help women process any past trauma and begin to prioritize their own needs. She obtained her master's degree in education and counseling from North Carolina State. She's a U.S. Army veteran, and as a mother, wife, and business owner, Nicole juggles many roles and understands the stress and struggles other women frequently face. She performs public speaking like today and workshops on women's issues, raising self-awareness, and managing anxiety. And in her free time, Nicole enjoys spending time with her family, reading fiction novels, and taking walks in the local parks in North Carolina. Welcome, Nicole, to today's conversation.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so excited to be here and be able to share about this much needed topic.
It really is. I think I put in some of our promo materials that everyone I know has had some sort of toxic or borderline abusive relationship touch them in some fashion, whether it's family, a romantic partner, or an employment relationship or a friendship. So we're going to get into a lot of how we can recognize these relationships, how we can deal with them in the process, and then how we can recover from them going forward. So let's get started.
Yeah.
Um, so I think we want to open today by asking how we define a toxic relationship, given that the word toxic is thrown around a lot right now.
Yeah.
And what are some common signs that someone might be in one?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really key just to reflect back on what you said earlier. I was when I told someone I was doing this workshop, a friend of mine, he said, "Oh, you're going to talk about marriages and romantic relationships and try to stay out of the bad dating scene." And I was like, "No, because this topic really transcends that. It does apply to work environments and family relationships." And so when you key in on that, that any of those relationships can cause you to feel uncomfortable or if you're feeling manipulated. Checking in with yourself is one of the biggest pieces, right? If you're in a relationship with somebody and they're close to you, so it does have to be a relationship where you feel close to the person. So an employment relationship, boss to peer to coworker to brother and sister, mother daughter, and then even romantic relationships, especially if you're feeling like you're being manipulated, if you're feeling like you're uneasy when you're around this person. Those are some of the key things to start with. And then some things that pop up. If that person is continually, or I would say, if they exhibit chronic anger, and maybe the anger doesn't always match the situation. So maybe if you're late coming to meet them for a dinner date or to be at a family event, and this triggers like this outburst and this really demeaning behavior towards you, that could be a key if you've seen this chronic anger pop up in situations in the relationship. Another one I would say, sarcasm. We use it a lot in our culture, but when you're seeing it within your relationship, that person always has like some shady or side comment to make about you or your presentation or how you manage yourself or your life. And you start to notice that it pops up continually coming into the conversation, and they say it with a laugh, but there's like this little bit of bitterness, little bit of shade. That's also a good sign to key in on. Another one, the third one I would say would be guilt tripping. I think it happens a lot with parent-child relationships sometimes, or vice versa. Sometimes kids can do it to their parents as well. Feeling like you have to do something because this person is connected to you, or because due to the relationship, they're owed whatever it is that they want you to do, or want you to participate in. So those are the key ones I would really look out for: anger, sarcasm, guilt tripping. Yeah.
Yeah, and would you agree that it's not always easy to see from the beginning of the relationship that some of these things are going to become problems later?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, even with the highest level of a toxic relationship is physical abuse and emotional abuse, where you're being called names or put down really specifically towards you. Not it's not. There's no way to say it's not happening. And so to say that you are keying in on those things, that you'll know right away is usually not the case, because most people that you enter into these relationships with, they don't, especially if it's a romantic relationship, they don't initially present with this sort of toxic behavior. Sometimes it takes a turn, or it just becomes increasingly worse as the relationship continues, and you're already deep into it. You're already in some sort of committed or connected relationship. And so you were like, well, this wasn't how it was before. They never popped up this way. Because people who have these traits, these toxic traits, they normally can present pretty well, and you can hold themselves together pretty well in the beginning of the relationship.
So, what do you think causes someone to exhibit some of these more toxic behaviors? I'm sure that's a complicated question, but what do you think kind of leads to somebody's acting out or, kind of turning the other cheek in a negative way?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question, because I think sometimes we do want to get to the root of why someone is the way they are. A lot of times it can be, as a therapist, we are trained to dig into people's childhood trauma and background and that kind of thing. And that can be key to why someone is exhibiting toxic behavior. Maybe they haven't dealt with some childhood trauma issue, or maybe they were neglected growing up, or maybe they were given a certain kind of attention and now they expect that in all of their relationships. And sometimes that's the reason why, if you could be a really centered person with your act together and really accomplished, a lot of times we think that a person who is in a relationship with a toxic person, that they came into it with low self-esteem, and they came into it with their stuff not put together. But really, what really happened was they might have been really confident, really put together, but that person who had those toxic traits, that's why they were attracted to them, because they were attracted to you because you actually exhibit some of the things that they may be missing in their life, some of the things that they might not have, and structure that they might not have. But when they paired with you, it became an issue because you couldn't give them that. And maybe you were caregiving for them or wanting to do well for them. And then that sparked that trigger where anger shows up, or sarcasm shows up, or you think you're better than me, or you think you could do this, or you don't have it all together. I've seen you at your worst, and they start to put you down because they don't even know how to show up healthy in a relationship.
So, what are some of the typical emotional and psychological effects of staying in a relationship like this? And how can they manifest in that person's just daily life?
Uh, yeah, if you've been in a toxic relationship or are currently in one, because some of us are doing this. Some people who may be watching this may be currently experiencing that. We have to speak to that as well. Um, I think some of the things that you can do is really to take care of yourself to start with, and to really take time to reflect um, in that space. Yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody's ready to start moving on and start getting out of this relationship, however that might work. What are some steps that they can take to start to distance themselves from this toxic relationship? And how can they start building the courage to finally say, I'm done, I'm out?
Mhm. So one, recognizing that it can be hard, especially if the person is related to you. But one of the steps I would say is if you can take a break, set a boundary, especially a physical break. Maybe it's time away from the person. If you're dating them, maybe you just don't see them for a little while. Usually I would say give yourself about 30 days to just not be connected to that person, not having long phone calls, not returning text messages. Um, if you're married to somebody, it's kind of harder. I would think, because we're not, I would think that you need to get some professional help for the relationship itself. And maybe your spouse is not ready for that. But maybe you are. So maybe that might be a good thing for you to seek help with a therapist, someone who can professionally help you walk through some things. But you can also set some boundaries in those relationships, time and space boundaries. Maybe it's just keeping your thoughts to yourself, maybe where you used to kind of pop back and have something to say every time they said something, or I think a lot of times in toxic relationships, the person who is being treated poorly, they want to tend to justify, or they want to tend to, let's examine it, let's have a conversation about it. And sometimes it's just not worth it if you've been repeatedly having the same conversation, to just pull back, take a look at your own thoughts, take a look at, is this a pattern, and really identifying that pattern, and how am I engaging in that pattern? And so I don't keep showing up for the negativity. So I would say definitely setting time and space boundaries, maybe disconnecting for a while, seeing how you're feeling, checking in with yourself. Am I feeling better because I'm not spending so much time with this person? Am I feeling more centered? Is my life kind of calmer? Those are some great things to do. The other thing I would say is to build up your support team. We all need people in our lives. And so lots of times in toxic relationships, there have been people in your life who've been keying in on it. Maybe they weren't very vocal, but maybe they've said some things to you like, are you sure this is right for you? Or, I sure don't like
Mhm.
how when we're out with you, how that person says stuff to you. Um, and those might be people that you need to lean on at this time where you're trying to make this transition, where you normally would have spent time with, maybe you went over your mother's house every Sunday and took that emotional abuse. So maybe you change up the game and go spend it with a friend instead, and recognize that you don't have to keep showing up over there. Maybe it's not as mandatory as you thought it was.
Yeah. I know one thing I've heard that has kept people from leaving and experienced this myself was kind of the sunk cost fallacy of like,
Mm,
especially in a dating relationship where I've put all this time into this person, and if I leave, I have to start over, and kind of I'm clinging to the devil you know situation. Like, how would you counsel somebody who's struggling with kind of this idea of like, but it's been such a long time that
Yeah, I
we've been
think I hear it a
together?
lot from women, especially especially if a woman has really put in a lot of time into a relationship, and maybe it's later in life that they started dating this person and felt like it was going to move to some more committed stage, or felt like it was at a really committed stage. And so now I don't, like you said, don't want to start over again, don't want to have to get back into the dating pool. Well, one thing I would say is, do you want to spend another 10 years in this same predicament? Because even if you are, over the age of 25, or you feel like you invested 10 years in this, or you've been together since high school or whatever it is, um, you have to reflect on your life. Do I want to spend another day, another hour, another year, another decade dealing with these same issues? Because that person, most likely, unless they're willing to do some work, then they're probably, the likelihood of them making a change is probably not going to occur just, out of the blue.
Hmm.
So that would be the question I would say that people need to ask themselves. Yes, I've given a lot of time to this relationship. Yes, I put in work, and maybe even financially. That's the other one. You know, if someone's become I've seen people who they've been bought houses and cars and things like that for a person, and they're like, well, I can't turn back now. We have a car payment together, or however are your finances, and is that really what's going to keep you? Because there are ways to solve those problems.
Mhm.
um, we just have to be willing to see past those things. So again, I would encourage people who are in that predicament, especially if you've been in a long term, 5 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever it is, to go and get some help, because you might need that unbiased opinion to help you walk through how will you disengage. Somebody to help you kind of map that out, and a therapist is a good place to start with that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. So, I'm going to take a second and answer some questions from the crowd because we've got some great questions already on here.
Right.
Um, One is when these are kind of related. When do you know if you should sever ties with a toxic person? And are there any circumstances when you should just try to keep the relationship going, to try to reconcile with them instead of severing ties?
So as far as when do you know you should advertise, I think that's that thing again is really dependent on the relationship, right? Because sometimes if it's a family member, you may not be able to sever ties completely. And that's the real thing, right? Maybe you can put some time and space boundaries. You don't go over there as much. You don't engage with them. Maybe you do sever ties completely. But for some people, if it's their mother or their father or something like that, it may be very difficult to say, I'm totally done with this relationship. It may not, but it may. And so I would say that taking that break from that person, really examining how you feel when you're not with them, will be a key indicator of if this relationship is not for me. And then when you do go back to re-engage, setting some really clear boundaries with them. And you may have to state these boundaries to them, like, I'm not going to give you money anymore every time you ask me to pay your phone bill. I'm not coming over here every time there's a holiday. And that may be hard for them to hear. They may, I would say, definitely react to that, and maybe an angry reaction. And that just validates, that could be very validating to you. Well, I did know that this is very clear to me. I need to get away from this person. So I would say that's a great indicator for you, is how you're feeling when you're not with them, and whether or not the situation calls for you to totally break away. Can you repeat the second part of that question? I remember it was
Yeah, are there any circumstances in which it's smart to, try to work through some of the problems instead of severing ties altogether?
yeah. With that, I would say it really, again, depends on your culture, your own background, the level of abuse that you're taking, because all those can be dependent on your situation. I know there are some people who really, spiritually believe that if you marry somebody, I'm with them forever. So in those cases, it might be really good to seek counsel. Maybe it's your religious counsel. Maybe it's um, professional, clinical help. However, to try some different tools, because if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. So engaging that person in a conversation about, can we do some things? And if that person is willing to show up, that means a lot. So that might be a time where you go, well, I'm not going to totally disengage. We're going to see how this goes. We're going to implement this strategy of going to some sort of counsel or professional clinical help. So that might be one way to gauge if that's a relationship that might survive this. Again, when we talk about the highest level of toxic relationship, physical abuse, we want to stress that we want everybody to be safe. So preparing yourself, getting yourself in a safe environment. We never want you to stay in a place where you're being physically harmed. And then emotionally, if it really is taxing, where somebody is really abusing you daily, then you really need to also make an exit strategy.
Hmm. Yeah. So once someone has successfully left their toxic relationship, what are some of the essential steps in the healing process, and how long might it take?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, we covered some of those already. I think the essential first step is to take care of you. you are the most important person in your life. I know a friend of mine, we were talking recently about like divorce situations and how people, that it can be really painful, but the best thing to do is like go reset. Even I know everybody can't afford a trip to Cancun, but if you could just go take a time in your own home and do some things that you like to do and spend time with yourself. And sometimes when you've been in a toxic relationship and you've been subject to the other person's opinion, and maybe even your hobbies have been their hobbies, and your time spent is when you're on vacation, you do the things that they wanted to do because they liked it, or you ate the foods that they wanted you to eat because that's what they wanted and you wanted to be accommodating. So now you got to get to know yourself again. You have to,
Hmm.
start experimenting, maybe take a class and do some things that you hadn't ever had a chance to do, to get to know what are your likes, what do you find interesting. And sometimes that can be very healing for a lot of people. The other one, I would say again, build up your support system, reconnecting maybe with people who did make you feel good. Sometimes when people are in a toxic relationship, they will sever other relationships, right? Because that person, they didn't like me hanging out with you, or that person, every time you came around, they got angry. So I was just like, why? I'm like, we're not even going to go over my family's house anymore because it will be an episode if I take him or her there. So maybe now's a great time to reconnect with some of those people who you feel are supportive and will love on you through the process of it all. Um, Putting some systems in place to be forgiving to yourself. A lot of times when we've been in a toxic relationship, we start to think of all the times we blamed oh, I should have seen this, or I should have known, and so journaling can be very helpful with that. Journaling about, how far you've come, journaling about what you've learned from the situation. And journaling is such a great thing because it allows you to express what's happening in your mind right now, get it out of you, but then also you can go back and reflect on it and see, oh, look where I was and look what I learned in that moment.
Yeah, because I mean, this doesn't have an exact timeline, does it? I mean, healing from
Yeah.
anything takes time.
It doesn't. I think, even a year, some people, it can be a little faster depending on the severity and the closeness of the relationship. But let's say you were in a relationship with somebody for 3 or 4 years. It may take you a few years to get past that. And I know when I talk to people about dating relationships, or even just any sort of romantic relationship, it may show up in your new relationship. So now you're on edge, or now you're fearful when that person who you're newly engaged with or newly hanging out with, they may do something that might remind you of the toxic relationship. And so now you've got to process that, and you've got to work around that, and hopefully have some conversations with your new partner. And that might be years down the road from when that relationship occurred, but it still could reside in you because it was so ingrained and showed up so often in the long-term relationship, or in the toxic relationship that you were in. Same thing for family relationships, those things, if so, can be so ingrained, especially if it's like a parent-child or a caregiver role, because that person taught you some things about relationships just naturally, right? We learn, especially that foundational relationship of parent-child. And so now you have to examine your own self and go, oh, do I really want to keep that part of what I learned about relationships? Or maybe I have developed a new concept of how a healthy relationship can look.
That actually leads beautifully to my next question, which is that, I think sometimes when we're in these toxic relationships, we learn dysfunctional ways of relating to another person because either that's what we're seeing from them, or those dysfunctional ways are the only ways to get through to that person or have it like communicate at all with them. So how do you avoid kind of taking some of those dysfunctional ways of relating to people into your next relationship so that you're not just perpetuating a cycle?
Yes, yes. So as soon as they show up, right? As soon as you feel like something's showing up, to try to address it. And maybe that person may not meant to, maybe they didn't mean to hurt your feelings, or maybe they weren't on, maybe that's not their regular pattern of doing things, but to address it. I had a close friend, she was in a relationship with, when we were in college, with a young man, and he would sometimes like be really sarcastic, like if she did a good job on something, or if she was in sports, so like if her team won, and he would come over to into our dorm room, and he would say stuff about, oh yeah, you think you're so great, or oh, now you think you're the boss because that happened or whatever. And so when I brought it up to her, I'm like, he doesn't seem happy for you. Like he just doesn't seem happy for you. Um, and then later on in life, when she did meet someone who was a little kinder and they seemed to get into a more committed relationship, she said she really had to work on that, because if her committed relationship, her spouse, who's now her spouse, he would say stuff in the beginning of the relationship, like, just tongue in cheek or make a joke. She sometimes didn't, because she had been in this relationship where this person was putting her down, but they were doing it in a joking manner. So they had to have conversations about, like, when you're giving me a compliment, I would like it if it went this way, or when you're joking, make sure you lead with that, because that helps me know that this is a joke. So I think having communication with the people that you are in healthy relationships with, talking about some of those insecurities. And that's a sign, right? If you can talk about your insecurities with a person that you're in relationship with, and they can hear you, and they want to help you, and they want to make changes even in themselves in order to better the relationship. That's a clear sign you're in a healthy relationship. If you're in a toxic relationship, and as soon as you bring up something that's wrong, or something you need help with, or something you feel like may have offended you, and that person gets escalated, or they get super defensive, or they shut you down and say, oh, you don't know what I know. Used to have a person who used to tell me in my life, you don't know what you're talking about. That's what they used to say. Well,
Mm-hmm.
like, how do I not know? I was here, I was in the conversation. so so if that person is that way, if they are, we're not going to talk about that. I think that's the other one that shows up sometimes. We're not even going to talk about it. Well, why are we going to talk about it? So that's a good way to know that you're in a toxic, person might be pretty toxic. And so in your new healthy relationships, being able to have those conversations can be really key to your healing and moving forward. The second thing I would say, being confident in yourself, because a lot of times when you're in a toxic relationship, you sort of lose confidence that I can even move. Can I even move forward? I messed up, this one, you blame yourself, like I did the picking here, or I let that person into my life. So one of the things I work with my clients about is saying, well, yeah, let's identify what happened. Maybe there was parts of it you could have avoided, and life happened and you didn't. So now, as you move forward into healthy relationships, now you know what your red flags are. You know your red flags are this. You know that if somebody starts to put you down and they're sarcastic, that's a red flag for you. If somebody, every time you bring up something that you see, or argument occurs, and during the argument they always blame you, no matter what, it always comes back to, yeah, I did it, but if I wouldn't have, if you hadn't done what you did, or you hadn't said what you said, you're like, oh, well, this is a red flag, that I might be in a toxic situation, and I'm gonna find my exit immediately. And so having confidence in yourself that now that you have learned, now that you've been in this really difficult relationship, you have gained some skills, and the next relationship, you're not gonna let yourself stay as long. Maybe I can't say you're not going to let yourself fall into the same trap, because it is hard, um, to sometimes figure out who's what, and especially if the person has been presenting so well and they've been really put together in the beginning of the relationship. But that as soon as you see it, you're going to address it, and you're going to, after you address it, if it's still there, you're going to set some boundaries.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the importance of a support system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what kind of support is the most beneficial? Because sometimes when you're in a toxic relationship, it's really difficult to tell which people who are naysaying your relationship actually have your back, and which ones may have some other agenda, or you assume they have another agenda because they're speaking ill of your relationship. What kinds of support is the most helpful, and how can people be supportive when they see their friends and family in toxic relationships that they should get out of?
Oh, yeah, I think that's such a great question because a lot of times we're looking into other people's lives and we can see things before they do. Or we can, especially if we love and care about the person and we're like, this might not be the best situation for them. So if you are in a toxic relationship and you're looking for support, sometimes we don't want to share, our business with everybody. So if you're at the job, for instance, and the boss is toxic with you, it may not be great for you to go around to everybody at the job, every coworker, and be like, hey, "Is this happening to you too? And this happened." That just might cause you more trauma, right? So to really find people that you connect with, find people that can hear you, and maybe they're not always giving an opinion, but they're really being good listeners. For many of us, that's what we need. We need somebody just to kind of hear us out, maybe reflect back what we're saying so that we can get ourselves in a space where we go, oh, I did say that to you, and now I can make a clear decision. Even when you come home sometimes to your spouse, they know I heard a lot of married couples, they come home and they're always, upset about their job and they're always mad about it. And I just try to tell them, do this, and she won't do it or he won't do it. And I say, yeah, but maybe that's not what they need from you. They just need you to be present, to listen, to reflect back what they said so that they can come up with a solution to dealing with the toxic person that's in their life. So I think that's key is to really find some people who seem like they're active listeners. They're not going to be judgmental about you and your situation. If you're on the other side of it, if you are the support person and you're wondering how to show up because you have somebody that you see is going through a difficult relationship, so brush up on your skills on being an active listener and staying engaged, and just being present and being able to say things like, I hear you, you sound like you're, and try to identify the feeling. You sound like you're frustrated when you go there. You sound like that makes you very sad. And because giving that reflection can really help other people key in. Most people are not going to make a change until they feel it's significant for them. And so we can give all the instruction we want, right? Go on tomorrow and leave him. But if that person is not really in that space or maybe they've got some other things to work out about that relationship, or they can still see some benefit in that relationship, they may not be ready to leave as soon as we would like. And so to be a support might be just to be present, to reflect back, and to love them as much as you can.
Yeah. One of the questions that we had from one of our audience members talked about supporting people in toxic relationships without getting sucked into the drama. Um,
Mm.
and how can you kind of avoid this and be, that person on the outside looking in without suddenly becoming, an accidental mediator or a lightning rod or, the third person in the relationship or um,
Yeah,
which can happen.
I have an uncle. He's a police officer of 25 years, and he used to say he used to hate domestic violence cases because when he showed up, when he would try to get the perpetrator out of the situation, the person who was the victim sometimes would turn around and jump on him physically or verbally, and he'd be like, "I came over here to save you."
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes even friends and family feel that way, like, we're here to support you. I'm stepping in. Maybe you're even talking back to the toxic person to tell them to leave your friend or family member alone, and suddenly you are part of the drama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to check in with again, that's where you check in with yourself, like, what is my role here? Do they really need me? Do they really need me to do this? Like, do I really need to go over there at midnight to solve their argument or, map out what that person should do? Again, if it's a safety issue, you want to help your person, because if it's abusive, you want to help them get resources. Again, but being safe, maybe tapping into local resources for abusive relationships and things like that. Um, and outside of that, just trying to be as present as you can without getting too sucked into the drama. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that there are a lot of toxic relationships where the more manipulative party will try to recruit supporters on their side, and it can be difficult for friends and family to kind of keep that, more neutral space and avoid getting sucked in and used as yeah, used as kind of a prop in the other person's, side of the argument. And
Yeah, yeah, especially if especially when it comes to like marriage relationships, if the person who is being toxic in the relationship, if they've been some sort of support system to the rest of the family, maybe they've provided financial support to your relatives, and maybe they've done things that have supported those people as well, then it becomes like, are people trying to choose who they're going
mhm,
to relate to or who they're going to believe about what's happening within the relationship? And that can be really difficult. But I always say, if you can just find one person, if you find
mhm,
one person that you can share your feelings with, that you can talk about, that you talk to about what you're going through. And yes, for some of us, that for some people, that may mean that you have to tap into a clinical mental health specialist, because maybe your circle has become that contaminated that people in your family or at your job or wherever, it is just not a safe space for you. So I just encourage, if you can find that safe space, whatever it may look like, maybe it is a friend, but if it is clinical help, then that might be a good space to find that as well.
yeah. And then what are some effective self-care practices and strategies to rebuild self-esteem and self-worth after experiencing this relationship? We talked about this a little bit, but
Mhm.
what are some things that people can start building into their routine to kind of get their confidence back?
Yeah. Yeah, we did. We touched on journaling. I'm a big fan of journaling, if you hadn't noticed, because I've kept journals since I could write. And so I really believe that the more you can express yourself and get your thoughts and feelings onto some sort of, and there's so many different options of journals now, right there. You can journal on paper, you can do video, audio journals, video journals. You can keep it on your phone or whatever, different platforms. So I just encourage people to do that. And also, though, to if you're in a toxic space and you're living with the person, you do want to find a safe space to keep your journal material. The other thing I would encourage is breath work. We are
Mm,
all so busy. We're go, go, go. A lot of times when you're in a toxic environment, you're on edge, you're tense, like you have interactions with the person and you're still feeling super tense. And breath work you can do anywhere. You can do it in your car, you can do it while you're waiting for your breakfast to get made. You can do it in the shower, like just taking a moment, keying in on your breath and just breathing through deep breaths in and out, and just focusing. There's lots of research about how it's helped with decision making, how it's helped with regulating your body. So I just encourage people to do breath work. There's lots of stuff on YouTube and things like that where you can find someone who looks like you or fits your. I know everybody's like, some people are like, I can't relate to that person doing the breath work, but if you can find somebody you can relate to doing it and leading you along, that's a great thing too. There's apps out there that you can get to help you breathe through the moment, or just putting on a song. I encourage some of my clients to do that too. Like if you have a favorite, really like a slow jam or something that's relaxing that you find that you turn on this song you can relax to, put the song on. Most songs only last 3 minutes or so, and just breathe through the song until you get to a calm point and start your day like that.
mhm,
So I encourage that. And then also I encourage you to really focus on what is it that trying to find what makes you happy outside of the relationship. And that might mean hobbies, that might mean doing nothing at times, but what is it that makes you happy? And looking at that and examining what was it that maybe attracted you to this person, or what was it that kept you in a relationship? If it's a family relationship, sometimes that's the attraction, right? We have this idea that we're taught what family should look like and what family should be. But a lot of those roles sometimes don't exist for everybody. Everybody didn't get the nuclear family. Everybody didn't get the loving so and so. the mother or father or caregiver or brother or sister. And so redefining for yourself, like, does this title mean that this person deserves this access to my life? And you might need to just sit and examine that for yourself and ask yourself those questions.
So we have a ton of questions from our
Okay.
group today, so I will get into some of these. One is basically asking if the person is promising to change, but you've had enough. How do you prepare yourself to not feel guilty for stepping out of the relationship?
Oh, that's a great one. I'm glad we should have thought about that one. Because words, right? Words are so powerful. They keep us, words can hold you in a relationship and they can start a relationship, right? If somebody
Hmm.
says the right thing, you're like attracted to them. If they say the wrong thing, you're like, ah. So I would say words, though, words don't always compensate for actions. So if somebody's continually telling you, well, I'm going to change, I'm not going to treat you like that anymore, or not going to berate you like that anymore, or whatever it is that they're doing to bring that level of toxic behavior into the relationship. They've said it so many times. They've said it and you heard it, especially if it's going on years. That's a key factor that they're probably not changing, right? That's probably not going to change. Maybe they want to, and I'm not saying that they're lying to you because they may seriously want to. But if they haven't taken some action, most of us need some sort of accountability partner or action steps. And if they're not doing any of that, but they just keep saying it, then that's probably a key indicator that you might need to take a break. And maybe even, in you separating yourself, you're letting them know that this is the boundary, because people will keep engaging with you at whatever level you let the door be open at. I'm not saying it's your fault or that you're the reason or whatever, but there's a level in which we say, well, I keep showing up and taking it, so they're not going to make an adjustment because they know that when they do it again, you'll be okay with it.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned a lot about seeking help from a therapist if you need that to kind of, rebuild yourself after one of these relationships or even help getting out of this kind of relationship. How do you go about finding an appropriate therapist who understands these situations and how to help the person appropriately? Not all therapists understand this kind of relationship.
Yeah. Finding a therapist is a journey. And I want to express that, even though your insurance company may give you a list, or maybe you go on your provider portal or you go on Psychology Today. So I always tell people to try to read the profiles that the therapist has up. Most profiles do have the education of the therapist. They have what the therapist is specializing in, who they like to see and who they like to treat. That'll be key indicators for you. Most people will put some sort of part about relationships into their profiles if they're versed in that. I was Gottman trained. I did level 1 and level 2, and that gave me a lot of insight into couples therapy. So if you're looking to take your person, maybe you and your a husband or wife or a long-term romantic partner, if you're looking for something, I'm going to say that that's a great resource to have someone who has some Gottman experience. The other thing is too, if you get into a relationship with a therapist, usually by about the second or third session if this person is relating to you and if you feel like you're getting something from it. Now, therapy is not easy. So don't go there and think that, oh, if the therapist is not my friend, or if I don't feel like happy every time I leave, then it's not a good session. The therapist should definitely be challenging you and challenging your thought patterns, because in order to make a change, we do have to have some challenges, and we do have to have somebody maybe examine things in a way that they have not been before. However, if you feel super uncomfortable and disconnected, then that's when I would say might be a chance to move to see if there's some other environment that might work better for you in a clinical setting. But don't give up. There's somebody out there for you.
I love this question. What if you recognize that you're the toxic person, but you're having trouble changing, especially when you're triggered?
Oh yeah, that's a good one, right? Because we can. I mean, everybody, again, we talked earlier about insecurities exist for everyone. And if you notice that you're showing up as the toxic person, or even if it's already been told to you that you're the toxic person, one is that you have identified it. That is key, that you're willing to hear it. Because a lot of times when the person who is exhibiting toxic behavior, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to discuss it. I think I gave the example earlier about my friend who was just like, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't even know, like, that never even happened. I think there's sometimes people will gaslight you. The toxic,
Mhm.
one of the top key traits of a toxic relationship is telling you it never happened, it never existed, never even took place. Like your perception is so skewed, it doesn't even fall on the radar. So when you start to be able to hear your loved ones or your person that you're in relationship with or your boss or whatever say, hey, this is presenting to be a problem, it's becoming a pattern, and you're able to say, oh, okay, I can key into that person's perception, or I'm at least willing to hear it. That's a huge step right there, that you're able to say, maybe it's me. The second thing I would say, if you feel like you cannot manage it yourself, you're like, I don't even know where to begin. Again, we go back to clinical help. Go find a therapist who you feel like might be able to walk you through examining some of that, because you're not going to be able to see yourself in a lot of times in whatever the situation is. And so I would recommend that. Also, just taking time for self-reflection, and maybe whatever the behavior is that your person or your boss or your relative is telling you is showing up as toxic, looking at what is the root of that for me. Like, okay, they say I get angry every time we're in this situation or every time this pops up. Why am I getting angry about that? And when you key in on that, it might open a lot of doors for you to change some
Mhm.
of that behavior.
But really, step one is just recognizing that it's problematic behavior. That's so huge.
That is huge because we can't change something we don't see, right, Amy? It's like
Hmm.
so hard. So if you're hearing, especially if you're hearing it in multiple settings, right? If you're
Hmm.
hearing it with your kids, and then you're also hearing it with your romantic partner, and you're also hearing it at work, it might be, well, maybe I am the problem. Yeah.
So we've had a couple of people ask something similar, so I'll just kind of put it into one question. Um, how might an adult go about staying safe, creating boundaries from a person when they're unable to leave the home? So I think this is specifically about a romantic relationship where they share the home, and maybe they share finances, pets, or children, where they risk, if they sever the relationship, they risk losing touch with shared people or assets.
Hmm. Well, one, we want to go to the highest level, which is that physical abuse I think we
Hmm.
spoke about earlier. If you're in that situation, and I just want to speak to those people, if you are being physically abused, but you feel like right now you can't leave the home, and I know that might not always be understandable to some people, but many times people are in a physically abusive situation, but they feel like they cannot just get up and disconnect. I would suggest you create what we call a go bag, which is having items that you know are essential to you. Maybe it's a copy of your keys, uh, copies of bank statements, birth certificates, anything you think you might need if you have to relocate in a fast or serious emergency situation, so that you have those things, and putting that bag in a location where it would be safe. Maybe it's the trunk of your car, maybe it's at your mother's house or your best friend's house, or maybe it's at your job situation, so that you can have those items if you should need them.
Mhm.
Because we just don't, we want you to be safe, and we want you to know that you're not alone and there are resources out there. Um, and then coming to people who maybe not be at that level, but maybe they're just not ready to leave yet. Um, those boundaries that we spoke of earlier, there are one, physical boundaries. So maybe you can carve out a space within your living situation, which is yours, that you can go to and really have a calm spot where you can kind of disconnect from other people. I had a friend once, she was going through a divorce and she had a walk-in closet at the bottom of her house, and they were not ready yet to separate due to the situation with finances and things like that. And one day I came over and she opened up this walk-in closet and she had like put prayer journals and materials for herself, like recordings and things like that, and her computer in there. And she was like, when I need to go and just escape, I'm coming in here until we figure out our transition situation, until we figure out how we're going to live separately. Because they had kids and they wanted to make sure the kids were okay. So maybe if you have enough space in your home to carve it, lots of people don't. So I want to speak to that as well. But maybe there's a space before you come to work, before you go to work, or before you come home. Sometimes people just use their car as that space to kind of decompress and have a moment, but just trying to find those moments where you can center yourself, make clear decisions, financial boundaries. If you've been overextending yourself to family members or whoever it may be, maybe it's a time that you reset those. Sometimes when we reset those, they can change a whole relationship. If you've been giving money to somebody or supporting someone's financial situation and you stop, that might discontinue the whole relationship. You don't even have to worry about it anymore. Right? I had a niece like that. I was like sending her money to help every now and then she just it became a little too much. And when I put the boundary up, she was like, "Oh, I'm not talking to you no more." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I understand what our relationship was based off now. So,
Hmm.
so yeah. Did that
Yeah,
answer the whole question? I hope.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, then we have a question about is there a way to recognize certain, we might have covered this at the beginning, but is there a way to recognize red flags when you're meeting somebody for the first time?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think we talked a bit about, but it is good to go back over that part,
Hmm.
because I think it speaks again to when you once you've been through a toxic relationship, you have earned some stripes and you have earned some things and learned some things about yourself. And a lot of times we get so sad about having been through those difficult, traumatic relationships. But to know, hey, I'm gonna gain some things. I'm coming into these next relationships. I am so confident now that when I see these red flags show up, I'm going to be prepared to handle them. And so red flags, though, can be really specific to you because some things that may bother other people may not bother you. So I think that's something that you can explore with your therapist. Like, what are my red flags? I know for some people, someone showing up late is a red flag. Then there's other people where name calling is a red flag, but maybe somebody else that might not be a red flag, if that's okay for you. Like we call each other names, I call him names, he calls me names, it doesn't matter. But for someone else, that might be a red flag. So being keying in for you, what are your red flags? And then having the confidence to know that when they show up, when they in the next relationship, if somebody exhibits that trait or that habit, one, you're going to have a conversation about it if it's the first time it's happening. We just don't want to totally cut somebody off if you feel like this might be a potential relationship that could be healthy. um, but feel free to just exit if you're like, no, never, not for me. Might not happen. Yeah.
And then we've got several questions that are kind of along the same line, so I want to take these kind of all together. Um,
Okay.
and they're about say your toxic relationship is with a family member and you've decided that because of multiple reasons, your mental health, etc., you've decided to cut those people out of your life. Um, and then you have to explain to other people in your life why you no longer speak to so and so family member. And in a lot of cases, in a lot of, our cultures, that's just kind of this uh, unexpected societal taboo. It's like, but that's your mother or that's your sister. You guys are blood. Blood is thicker than water. And how would you go about, not saying you have to justify your choices, but how would you go about explaining to other people, I reached my breaking point?
Yeah. And I think that first to address that part about you have to. you have to explain or you should explain. Do
Mm,
you? I think that's a question you have to cover for yourself because each, as you spoke earlier about culturally, that might be
hmm
how things happen in your culture or the dynamics of the relationship, especially if it's a mother and the other siblings are wondering why you or extended family member. What if the answer to that question becomes do maybe I don't have to, maybe you don't have to, maybe you don't have to go into detail with other people. Maybe you're just stating the boundary. I think sometimes we do get into these long drawn out conversations wanting to justify why we're not speaking to Aunt so and so or to my mama and then now it becomes a whole family dynamic, right? Because now people are sharing information or that game telephone, you tell one person, they go back and tell the person you're disconnecting from what they thought they heard. And that's a whole different show of what you actually meant when you said it. And that can cause other family dynamics for you. So if the answer to the question after you examine it of should I or I have to explain is no, then explain and really stick when they ask you, stick with your boundary. I have decided right now it's not healthy for me to spend time with this person. I have decided that right now I'm not going to financially support whatever it is, or just really stating the boundary around that. And that I think that's helpful for you. Now, if the answer is yes, that you have to, then I would say to keep it brief, right?
hmm
Keep it as brief as possible and when you're trying to relay maybe what the final breaking point was for you or the pattern of behavior, to talk about it like you would as if you were a reporter.
hmm
Leave a lot of the emotion out of it because
hmm
most of the time people may not understand if you're saying, and I feel this and I feel, and they're like, well, maybe they don't even agree with your feelings. So to say, well, this happened, this happened, this happened. And then that's when I decided I needed to make a boundary.
Yeah, I think that's a great recommendation for all of these situations, really.
Mm.
Is to just explain it as your fact, your truth, and you followed up on it.
Yeah,
Um,
that explaining as a reporter can be very
mhm.
helpful. Like these are the facts and sticking with that.
Well, so we're a little short on time, so I think that I would just ask if there's anything else that you want, if people are struggling with either getting out of a toxic relationship or healing from a recent toxic relationship, what is kind of that one takeaway that you are hoping that they leave with today?
The one takeaway I hope they leave with is that they're not alone. I think when we opened up the conversation, we talked about that almost everybody has had some experience where they've been in a relationship where they felt like it was just not a good, productive, reciprocal relationship for them. And so if you're in a relationship where you feel like you're not respected, you're not cared for, and your opinion isn't heard or valued, then you are not alone. And then there is help out there for you, whether it be your caring support people or also seeking some clinical mental health assistance.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about this for another couple of hours, but I won't do that to everybody today.
I think we need
But
another one on forgiveness,
right.
self forgiveness. Right?
But I will say that we can, as on top of the recording, we can also provide some additional resources that people can look into if they have further questions. And then if also, I'll note that if you need help navigating any of these issues and want a place to start, our helpline is available Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. Um, I will put that contact information in the chat for everybody if you would like it. And you're also welcome to check out the Transformation Counseling and Consulting website and see if there's any provider there that might be able to assist if these issues are striking a little close to home. I think I'm safe making that plug for you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Keep an eye out for an email by the end of the week where you'll get the recording. You'll also get a feedback survey. We do pay attention to these and we do share them with the speakers. So if there's any feedback about today's webinar, if you want to see more on these kind of topics, please let us know. We do, take all of these responses into account when planning our future sessions. And I'll say keep an eye out for our September sessions. We are working on the details for a couple of different webinar topics, and so we'll be advertising those on our normal channels as soon as all of those details are finalized. Um, but Nicole, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving of your time and your expertise to talk about these things.
Well,
We
thank
really
you.
appreciate, yeah, we really appreciated having you. And again, we will be back in touch with some additional resources and this recording for everybody who registered. So until then, hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.